I'm in the chair on Linda's behalf this evening. She is away on her holidays, so she sends her regards. But on Linda's behalf and on behalf of all the committee, thank you for all of you for coming along this evening. Hopefully take about an hour or so. We shouldn't go on for too long. If I could just ask again, anyone that has just joined the call, if you can make sure that you are muted so that we're not getting any interference through the Zoom. Session is being recorded for people that can't attend, so hopefully no objections to that. So we'll have a look then at the agenda that we're going to cover off this evening. You can see that on the next slide. I'm going to do a couple of administrative points first of all, and then Robert Johnson has kindly agreed to join us as well and talk about a few technical umpiring points. So thanks to Robert for joining us, and thanks also to George for coordinating this all and setting things up this evening. So just before I start, probably to keep the call quality okay, if there are any comments as we go through, please leave them in the chat box. Janet, I think you're having some sound trouble. Hopefully it's working for everybody else, but if anybody else is having any trouble hearing me, do just say, but hopefully it is coming through okay. So if you have any questions as we go through, please do feel free to put them in the chat, and we will deal with those at various points as we go along. So first point we're going to cover then is about Tech Solutions and Game Day. So the platform that we use to look at our appointments and mark our availability as we go along. So we'll have a look at that in the next slide, please, George. If we hop on to the next one. Okay, so you'll have noticed, obviously, having probably been on the Tech Solutions software, that it has had a bit of a facelift, and probably long overdue, some might say. Get a little bit of additional functionality. It is looking a bit better than it did last season. So that's good news. That has been the case throughout Ireland. So both the IHUA platform and the Ulster platform have had a bit of a facelift. You will notice that Fixtures Live, which Ulster Hockey used as their game management platform, is gone. Both Hockey Ireland and Ulster Hockey are now using a platform called Game Day. And you'll see that I've put a screenshot there on the right hand side as to what that looks like in the Ulster Hockey website. That was procured by Hockey Ireland in recent months. Now there is an umpiring platform within Game Day. Potentially next season we may be switching over to that. There's a bit of work obviously before we would get to that point. A bit of work with IHUA too, to try and make sure everything is smooth from the perspective of working with them and the other provinces too. Question from Jamie there. If you comment a question about the system, where do you send it? Everything is coming through from IHUA, so it's IHUA that has looked after the upgrade. So it would be a question for the IHUA committee. If you want to send something particular, you can send it to me, Jamie, and I can pass it on if there's a particular point. So really, what's the space with regards to next season? We've had this update to Tech Solutions, and we're using that for now, and we'll see what happens with regard to next season. One other point I just want to make, not related to the software as such, but regarding radios. There's a number of us have old radios that were issued by IHUA. Most of us probably have the Umpire Talk radios that were issued by Ulster Hockey, and obviously over the last year or so those have been upgraded to a newer model. There are a number of us that have sort of old IHUA issued radios. We would like to collect those back in and make those available to the young umpires to use. I do have a list somewhere in the archive of who has those radios, but if you do know that you have one and that it was issued by IHUA and not Ulster Hockey, if you do cross paths with me during the season, if you could give that to me. As if we're giving those back to IHUA, that would be much appreciated. But if you do know that you have one of those, if you could let me know, that would be great. So if we move on to the next piece, which is a quick update on the COVID-19 protocols. Slightly different from what we had last season, although not drastically. Ulster Hockey issued a new document ahead of the start of the season, and that's available on their website on the front page. You can have a look at that if you want to see some more of the details. But just going to summarise the main points that relate to us as umpires. So same as last year, all games should still have a COVID officer in attendance. We don't need to meet them as umpires. We don't have to have a meeting with them before the game, but the club should still, in theory, have one that is present at the game. Same as what we encountered last year, possibly unfortunate as we're coming into probably more inclement weather. Changing and showering facilities may not be available at every venue that we go to. It really depends on the situation with each club and whether they're playing at a school, for example, and those kinds of considerations. So we may not have changing and showering facilities at every club throughout the season. However, it should always be toilet facilities available at a club, and I know there was a couple of places where that was a problem at the start of last season. If that is an issue, please do let someone in the committee know, and we'll take that forward, because whilst changing and showering facilities may not be available, there should be toilets available. Clubs no longer have to gather track and trace information. That is a change in the legislation, so they can if they want, but don't be surprised if you don't have to provide that information at your games. And the last point I think is an important one to make on car sharing, which of course in the before COVID era we were all well used to and encouraged to do as umpires. This season it's certainly not obligatory, but it's also not prohibited either. So really it's up to the two umpires. You can use your personal judgment on that. You do not have to do it. You will not be penalised for not sharing a car with your colleague this season. But if the two umpires are happy to travel together to a game, and both are happy to do so, you're not prohibited from doing that. So really that's down to our own personal judgment this season on that one. And then just a little bit about player conduct as well, just as a bit of a refresher. First one is an important point, and even before the pandemic, has been a lot of work in hockey in Ireland to clamp down on this. It's not a very pleasant sight in the game. So pitch side urination, if it happens within the pitch area and during the game, that is a red card. If it happens outside of the pitch area and at any point, and they shouldn't be doing it there, it's a code of conduct offence. It's not a red card. If it happens outside of the pitch area, even though it may be, say, a substitute during the match, that's a code of conduct issue. So within the pitch area and during the game is a red card, and outside of the pitch area at any point is a code of conduct offence. And that's the same across Ireland. That's the same regulation that we're all working towards there. Spitting, we should discourage it. It's not good behaviour during the health situation that we're facing at the minute. But let's not go looking for trouble. If it's a persistent problem, you can use a card for it. but let's try and have a quiet word and discourage rather than creating a problem for ourselves from the outset. So let's discourage that and card if necessary. However, a reminder as from last season, if someone was, hopefully not, but to cough in the face of someone else, that is a red card. We don't want to see that, whether it's a player to another player or a coach or an umpire. That is certainly a red card if that happens during the match. There's been some discussion about huddles. Again, discouraged. You'll see if you read Ulster Hockey's protocols that social distancing is to be kept at 1 metre. Huddles are to be discouraged, but once again, let's not go looking for trouble. Let's have a quiet word if we can, and try and work with the players that way rather than pulling any rabbits out of the hat, any surprises. So if you think that's becoming a problem in the game, maybe have a quiet word with the captain and let's try and deal with that that way. Do be aware as well that this could change as the season goes on. What the procedures are now may not remain the same for the whole season. So do keep an eye out on our website as umpires, or on the Ulster Hockey website as well. And we'll try and keep you informed of any updates. But I think the big summary of this slide is let's apply our common sense. Let's not go looking for trouble. We've enough to deal with on the pitch as umpires as it is. So let's not go looking for any trouble there. And I would say as well, if you see any particular issues at clubs as you go around the country, if there is something that you see as a particular problem, you do let someone on the committee know, and we can take that forward. For you. A couple of questions coming in, so deal with those before we move on. Neil, during the game is the 70 minutes first to last whistle. Yes, we're not including half time in that, so we don't want to start doing that at half time. During the game, yes, the 70 minutes otherwise. From Jamie, if coach misbehaves, yes, we'll be mentioning that later on, so I will come back to that, because that's a nice segue into the next piece, which is a reminder of the disciplinary procedures. So I think it's worth touching on those for a couple of minutes. So if we hop on then to the next slide, please, George. Thank you. You'll remember, those of you that joined the briefing last season, that this was a new procedure for us all to follow. It was slightly different to how we had done things before. So I think it's worth having a reminder and a refresher of what we're doing in terms of disciplinary within the Ulster Leagues this season. So if you give a red card, you record it on the match card, and there needs to be a written report submitted to the disciplinary committee within 3 days of giving that red card. And the form you will find on our website at ulsterhockeyumpires.com. And just a reminder that within the pitch area during the match is a red card. It's a code of conduct offence otherwise. Yellow cards. We're not doing yellow card reports. Last season was the first time we had that changed. I think probably good news for us all. It was a little bit less paperwork that we had to do. But we must record yellow cards on the match card after the game, and we must report them. So far this season, the disciplinary committee have been getting the feeling that perhaps there have been fewer yellow cards than they have in previous seasons, and we suspect that's probably not the case. We suspect that there are yellow cards that are not being reported, that there are being recorded on match cards. And the reason that there is concern about that is, of course, because an accumulation of yellow cards leads to a suspension for the player. So if a player accumulates 20 minutes worth of yellow card time under the disciplinary rules, that is an automatic 1-game suspension. So If yellow cards are not being reported, well then the persistent offenders are not being punished. So it is very important that we send the details of the cards into the disciplinary inbox as we give those out. A quick audit, for example, from last weekend that the disciplinary committee did in advance of this meeting showed that there are 3 cards where the details are missing. So it is very important that if we give a yellow card in a match that that we do take a picture of the details on the match card and send the details of that to the email address that that is on your screen. A copy of this slide deck will be put on our website. That email address is there anyway, but do keep that to hand so that if you do give a card, you'll be able to submit that, and the disciplinary panel will be able to deal with that accordingly. Because by doing that, then we'll be able to deal with the persistent offenders. A little bit more detail on red cards. Some of you have seen this before. We've talked through it before, but again, I think it's a good reminder of what the disciplinary committee needs to hear when an umpire is submitting a red card report. And if you try and keep this in mind, if you've given a red card, if you try to keep in mind these 5 W's and structure your report around this. So the big summary for this is that we need to keep the reports factual. We mustn't let a red card report stray into anything that is opinion or that is supposition, that is something that we didn't see, that we think happened but we didn't see it. We need to make sure that it's factual. So we need to hear in a red card report who exactly was involved. Obviously, if you've given a red card, you've seen it. Did your colleagues see it? A bit of detail on that as well. We need to know exactly, factually, what happened. What exactly did you see or hear or feel? What exactly was said, and that may be an unpleasant thing to jot down, but we do need the details of that to go into that. So please don't generalize, please be as specific as you can in telling us what happened, what were the facts of the incident. A bit of context about when it happened is useful. At what stage of the match did it happen? Did it have an implication for the resumption of the match? A little bit of detail on that is useful. Where did it happen? Was it on the pitch? Was it on the touchline? And where were you watching from? Where was your colleague watching from when it happened? And then finally, probably the most difficult one, why did it happen? And this is a context one as well, because as I've said, we really need to keep this factual, and why it happened. We could very easily stray into the opinions of why we think something happened. But if there is something specific that that is likely to have caused or preceded an incident, that's useful context for the disciplinary committee to hear. And it's useful if you could add that in. If you have any concerns as you are putting together one of these reports, or if you have any questions on this, there are a number of umpires, myself included, that are part of the disciplinary panel. Do feel free to contact one of us. We're more than happy to support with that. Because it's a very important thing for us as umpires to get right. So any questions on that, either based on the information you're hearing this evening, or as you encounter various things during the season, please feel free to let one of us know. And then turning that slightly to look at the code of conduct. A slightly specific area of discipline, worth briefly touching on what then constitutes a code of conduct offence, who it could be that commits a code of conduct offence, why we should report those, how we report those sorts of incidents, and again, what sort of information we should be including there. And very similar to what we just talked about in terms of red cards, but just a few particular nuances that we need to note. So move on to look at what actually constitutes a code of conduct offence. So that's any offence that does not occur during the match. And quite often that will happen at the end of the game. We don't want to see red cards given after the end of the game. That's not the correct procedure for us to follow. Something happens at the end of the game, that would constitute an offence. That's a code of conduct issue. And we define that as anything that's bringing the sport into disrepute. So it could be discriminatory conduct, could be harassment, could be inappropriate behaviour, could be something unsporting. But it doesn't necessarily have to happen at the end of a match. It could happen before the match starts, or even increasingly potentially not even around the area of a match at all, because an offence could now, of course, be committed on social media, and there have been code of conduct cases in the last couple of years related to things that have been said on social media as well. So that's something else for us to bear in mind. And all of these procedures and the code of conduct are available on the website. If you have a look under information and downloads. Everyone who is a participant in hockey, so that's us as umpires, that's players, coaches, spectators as well. We must all comply with the code. We're all subject to it. And then we, of course, as umpires, on the day, if we see something that is a code of conduct offence, we may be minded to report that. Just on the point about the end of matches and things that may be unsavoury happening then, there is a 20-minute cool-off period, remember, and that's there to protect us as umpires. When we get to the end of a match, emotions may be running high. We're all entitled just to take a break for 20 minutes. If we're all, I suppose, able to deal with things, then we can, but we don't want players' emotions, umpires' emotions getting in the way and causing a problem there. So good practice. If you need 20 minutes at the end of the game for the players to cool off, for us to cool off, that period is there. Let's make use of it. Probably not good practice for us to run away during the 20-minute period then, and to not offer to speak to a player at the end of that. So good practice to stick around for that 20 minutes if there is a player or a coach that would like to come and speak to us in a civil way after that period is finished. So on to the next slide then, and just to talk a little bit more about why it's important for us to report these incidents. Might be something we think, oh well, it's nothing to do with me, or didn't really affect me. It's worth remembering that point at the top of the page. We might all think that we are thick-skinned and that we don't mind being shouted at or abused, but there may be another umpire that goes to that venue next week or has to deal with that particular individual next week, and they may do the same thing then. So if there is something that you feel constitutes a code of conduct offence, do report that, because of course worth bearing in mind that we all have different levels of experience. It's great that we have some new umpires on the panel this season, and we must protect everyone from those unsavoury situations, and not let it get to that. If you're not sure whether something is a code of conduct offence, or if you've seen something that is concerning you or worrying you, speak to a committee member, or a member of the disciplinary committee, or a senior colleague in umpiring as soon as you can after the incident, and if you sort of lay out the facts to them, we'll be able to advise on what you should do with that, because of course we're all here to help each other, and you know, it's important for us to get enjoyment from what we do as umpires as well. So don't be afraid to consult with any of us. And then just to close this bit then on the code of conduct, would reiterate what I've said about red card reports. Very similar style of writing for those. How you write a code of conduct report is very important. Same as the red card report. The disciplinary panel needs enough factual information to allow them to make the right decision and to apply the right sanction to whatever has happened. So please do keep the report factual. Bear in mind what we've said already. Don't bring in opinion or emotion or personal language. And just to emphasize that point again, that if it is something that is verbal, please state exactly what was said. Please be accurate in that, so that the disciplinary committee can make an accurate judgment on what has happened, there. Increasingly, we are seeing issues coming up on social media. You know, we don't like to see umpires being talked about in social media either, and that shouldn't be the case. If anything derogatory is said about an umpire on social media, that shouldn't be happening, and that could well be a code of conduct offence as well. So, you know, if you've seen something that's concerning you, take a screenshot of that as well, consult about it, but that could be a code of conduct offence as well. But just to summarise, if you are compiling a code of conduct report, please use that same framework of how to write a red card report when you're doing that. That's just a few administrative bits to go through. You'll be pleased to know I'm done with all of those, and it's a great pleasure to hand over to Robert Johnson, who's going to take us through the next bit on a few technical points on umpiring for this season. So over to you, Robert.
Thanks, Russell. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I'm in the cupboard under the stairs at home where my family keep me, so hopefully my Wi-Fi will hold up and everybody can hear you. So you'll see there a list of bullet points that we're going to cover during this session. I discussed this with Linda a few weeks ago. I think I've already realised that we're not going to finish in the next half hour. So if everybody's happy to stay on for a bit, I don't really mind. If you've something else to do at 8:30, then go ahead. I'd probably end up talking to myself for the next 2 or 3 hours, which again is very common for me as well. So that's roughly that list of bullet points, what we're going to cover. I'm going to cover the old chestnuts, aerials, tackles and breakdowns, which we discuss every year. Before that, Linda has specifically asked me to cover a little bit about game preparation, general match management, which we'll just touch on, and dissent, which follows on nicely from what Russell covered as well. It did strike me when I saw this that there's probably a really good caption competition to go along with Julie's photo, but that's maybe for another night as well. Okay, George, if we just go on to the first match, a little bit of match prep. I'm not going to read out all the words. Two parts to match preparation. I think it's as a group of umpires, we undervalue match preparation. Generally speaking, you should talk to your colleague, recommending at least by Thursday evening, at the latest for a Saturday game. And then obviously if it's a midweek game, you should be thinking 48, 72 hours before the game. I put down a little list of bullet points. This is a personal thing. I think everybody's preparation is different. There are obviously some things that you definitely want to cover in your match preparation around shirt colours, times do you agree, and stuff like that. A few other things that some of us do, and some of us have been umpiring for a long time. Things like the weather forecast. I know that can influence how you're going to manage the game. It can influence your travel if you have to go a long way. Towards the end of the season, maybe not so much this time of the year, but towards the end of the season, that's when all the leagues and the trophies are won. So be aware before you go to a match, what's at stake for the two teams. One team could be going for a league title, one team could be in a relegation battle. That's really, really important, because you'll understand then the tenor and the tempo of the match before you get there. And then a few other basics. Charge your radio. I'm sure a few of us have turned up to games and found that either the radio wasn't charged and you have to plug it in somewhere really quickly before the game, or you just go without because you forgot to charge it. So a few things to think about, but the really important point here is make sure you do that phone call and that contact with your colleague before the game. And then next slide then is a bit on match day itself. Again, recommending you meet at least 45 minutes before start time. That's not always possible. I appreciate people have work commitments, they have other commitments, but again, that should be part of your preparation with your colleague. Make sure when you can get there. Again, try to set up your radios and things early. I know when we got the radios last year before COVID intervened, I think we probably all had problems getting them paired. I think we're all a wee bit more experienced and better at it now. Certainly in the last few weeks, it seems to be working pretty well, but leave yourself plenty of time to do that. And then this is really important, is to talk about how you're going to manage the game with your colleague. Okay, so it's not enough just to turn up, agree your shirt color, set up your radio, and then sit and twiddle your thumbs until the game starts. So have a really good chat with your colleague for that match on how you're going to manage your areas of control, how you're going to issue and manage cards and deal with misconduct that we talked about. Aerials we're going to come on and talk about in a minute. And make sure we've got consistency. And lots of us, if not all of us, have played the game. And the one thing we cry out for as players is for the umpires to be consistent. Okay, so make sure that's part of your pre-match preparation, that we're consistently applying the rules as we go through. Agree who times the matches, or times the quarters in terms of start and finish. Again, if in games like Ulster Shield and Kirk Cup semi-finals and finals, if they happen this year, you'll have a technical table. So again, just agree with the technical table around how we're going to do match timings. For most weeks, it'll just be us as umpires doing the match times ourselves. And finally, a little bit on radio etiquette. And I know we all do it slightly differently. I got a really good bit of advice many years ago on how to speak on a radio to your colleague. And if you can discipline yourself to do this: decision, reason, additional information. So if Russell and I are umpiring a game, something happens in his circle, and I'm the supporting umpire, what Russell needs from me is decision, what's the reason for it, and then anything else that needs to come after that. Okay, so have a chat with your colleague. There's no point in a radio conversation with your colleague shouting foot, 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 if your colleague has no idea whose foot it hit. Obviously, that's quite important. So a little bit of chat about how you're going to manage your radio conversations. Okay. And in the last part of your preparation, leave plenty of time for a warm-up, which some bloke called Robert Johnson didn't do 2 weeks ago, and then ended up limping before the end of the game because he didn't do enough warm-up. So just make sure you do that. Get the captains in early, toss the coin. Again, I know a lot of us have a chat with the captains. There's an opportunity at the coin toss to tell the captains what your expectations for behaviour are during that game. Okay? And certainly this season, I've been giving the captains a very strong message that verbal abuse of umpires is not acceptable. There's lots of umpires sitting at home who are really good umpires who won't come out and do games because they've had a bad experience. So I've been telling all the captains the first checkpoint in the game is that coin toss where you tell them, not today, thank you. So don't miss that opportunity. And very, very finally on match prep, you can do all the preparation in the world that you want to get ready for the game. Something may go wrong. The game before yours may overrun by half an hour. There may be roadworks on the way to a venue. Things go wrong on match day, so make sure that you have a plan B and you know what you're going to do in the event of a delay or an obstruction. Okay, that's a bit on match prep. Very important. Don't underestimate the importance of your match day preparation and your pre-match preparation. Linda asked me to cover a little bit on game management. I could probably talk for 4 hours on game management, but very, very quickly. This is something that I feel as a group of umpires particularly that we need to do a bit of work on. I think probably game management and being proactive and preventative is one of the hardest things to master in umpiring. We all know the rules, we can all see a foot, we can blow a free, we know the signals for various things, but how to manage a game is a real skill in itself. Okay, so I think as a group we probably don't do enough. We don't do enough early in the game to set our standards, and then that causes us problems later in the game. So the one big message I want to give you all in terms of game management is Be much more visible early in the game. Let the players know what their standards are and be proactive in enforcing that. Again, for those of us who've umpired together for many years, we talk about this during our preparation about getting the first 5 or 10 minutes right. Making sure if there's somebody interfering in the 5 meters that we manage. It doesn't have to be a card. It can be a strong whistle and a word, but making sure that we let the players know no interfering in 5 meters. Things like verbals, talking, breaking down play. Don't miss an opportunity early in the game to get that message across. If you get the first 10 minutes of the match right, and the two teams are just playing good hockey, then the next hour, the rest of that match will be so much easier for you to manage. If you're not dealing with issues, if you're not being proactive early in the game, issues build up, the tackles get worse, the 5 meter breakdowns aren't being managed. We've all been there, we know what happens. You try to grab a game in quarter 3, but it's far too late. You should be grabbing that game in quarter 1. Right? So I feel, and I think for many, many years, as a group of umpires, we really need to work on that proactivity and that game management early on. Okay. Moving on then, and this is a slide that carried over from last year, I think probably from Ian did this last year. What is our aim when we go onto a pitch? What are we trying to do? Well, obviously we're trying to strive for excellence. I think there's a really important sports psychology point here. We can never be 100% perfect. It is impossible to achieve. There's no such thing as a perfect umpire. There's no such thing as a perfect player or a perfect coach. Okay? We can strive for excellence as much as we can achieve, but we can't ever achieve perfection. So that's really, really, really important to do the best we can during the game. You'll all be aware of the FIH umpiring manager awareness recognition action. Make sure that becomes part of your game management. Right? Too many times I've coached a lot of you, I've assessed umpires, I've watched lots and lots of hockey where things are happening on the pitch and we forget about the action. We're aware there's problems, we recognize where the issues are, but we don't take the appropriate action. So don't forget that last step, vitally important. Okay. And then the last, I'll not read them all out because they're on the screen there. Control, hockey's all about control and flow. Umpiring a game of hockey, we all know the rules, we all know what it's about. We know one team's trying to beat the other and score more goals. So what we really need to manage during the game is the flow of the game and that flow being under control the whole time. And if we get control and flow right, everything else will fall into place. Okay? So if we all have a standard aim and a common goal when we go onto the pitch, then we should become predictable because everybody knows what we're trying to do. Okay, that's very general, very, very quick gallop through game management. And making sure that we've got those standards right. So moving quickly on, Russell's already talked through how you do yellow cards, how you report them. So how do we deal with them on the pitch? And Linda, again, gave me a brief that she wanted me to specifically cover a couple of issues in particular. First one is foul and abusive language. Again, I'm not going to read out what's on the slide because you can read it quicker than I can say it. But big message is never ignore it. Never ignore foul and abusive language on the pitch in whatever form it takes. Okay, even a player getting frustrated with themselves, letting out a big loud shout and typically whacking the pitch with their stick because they missed an open goal. Don't ignore it. Okay, we're trying to take foul and abusive language out of the game. Go back to my starting position in game management. If we're proactive at the start of the game, if we manage it in the first 5 or 10 minutes, it won't happen in the next 60 minutes, so it shouldn't. And if it does, then there shouldn't be any surprise when we step in and deal with it. Okay, we've got lots of tools to deal with foul and abusive language. And again, we're not automatically reaching for card. Right, that's not our first management tool. We've got our voice. We can speak to players. We've got a whistle. We've got our body language. We've got lots of tools that we can use to keep foul and abusive language out of the game. If it does happen, awareness, recognition, action, deal with it. Okay, if the players aren't getting the message and they're not doing what you ask, then we're thinking about sanctions. Okay, but big message, big takeaway for foul and abusive language: do not ignore it. Okay, deal with it on the pitch. Okay, moving on then. This players protesting. So this is different. Foul and abusive language obviously is an issue in its own right. This is players who are just going on and on and on, and they don't necessarily have to use bad language. They don't have to say anything personal, but protesting about decisions, giving off, just generally whinging. Right? Again, we need to deal with it. You'll see in the very first bullet point, and Jamie asked the question earlier, the captain is responsible for the behaviour of their team. In Ulster hockey and also in Irish hockey now, the captain is also responsible for the people on the bench, including the coach and the manager, and the physio if there's one there. Okay, so we're making that very clear. Where you're getting abuse from the bench, then you deal with it through the captain. If one person is giving you a load of verbal abuse, you deal with that individual. Okay? If it's multiple players protesting, appealing, and they keep going on and on and on, and we've all been there, then use the captain. Okay? And I go back to our little game preparation. If you make the captains clear about that when you're tossing the coin or just before you toss the coin, that they're responsible for the behaviour of their team, then they can't be surprised when you speak to them during the match. So fairly clear around players protesting. Now, a couple of other points, and this is from observation, and this is from coaching umpires and from obviously doing lots of games. Really good bit of advice. Once you have warned the captain, then ensure you take action against the next player from that team who offends. Okay, so only ever warn the captain once. Don't warn the captain and then 5 minutes later warn the captain again, and then go into the second quarter and warn the captain again, because that's totally ineffective. Once you've warned the captain, the next player from that team who misbehaves, bin them. It's really important for your credibility. It's really important for your game management, because if you don't take action after you've warned the captain, then your warning to the captain hasn't actually meant anything. Okay. A couple of other little things around that. If you warn the captain of one team about their behavior, and then the next player who protests is from the other team, just make sure you don't bin them, okay, unless it's really, really bad. Make sure you treat both teams exactly the same, okay? And if, like lots of us do, sometimes, and had this in my EYHL game on Saturday, my colleague called in both captains because in the third quarter, the game got a little bit fractious. There was a few things happening, and he just stopped time and he called both captains in and he gave them a fairly stern talking to, okay? So at that point, the next player from either team who misbehaved was walking, because now both captains have been warned. Okay? And I know we all do that. It's a really good sanction. It's a really good game management if we need to do it. Okay, so a couple of key takeaways. Once you've warned the captain, take action against the next player from that team, and never warn the captain more than once. Only do it once in a game. And finally, crowding, which again is very, very topical and has been for a few years. In hockey, a crowd is more than one. So if two people are having a go at you, then it's a mandatory green card for the second player in. So if two people run at you and start protesting, you just green card the second one. If they both come at you at the same time, pick one. Right? Pick the one that's shouting the loudest. Doesn't really matter as long as you deal with two players protesting. Right? And make sure the captain's aware of that. If there are repeat offences during the game and you find that players are crowding you or they're surrounding you, then once you've gone green card for the first time, it's yellow card after that. Right? So as long as we all do the same thing and we have a standard approach to how we're dealing with crowding. My experience, I have to say, in the last 5 or 6 or 7 years, I think we've managed crowding out of the game of hockey. I don't see a lot of it. I don't see it happening. I don't see players surrounding umpires anymore. And when I do see it, which is quite rare, I think we're pretty good at dealing with it. You see lots of umpires putting one finger up and saying, just one of you speak. I think players and coaches have sort of got that message now. Okay. But it's incumbent on us to make sure we keep dealing with it and keep that protesting in those crowds out of the game. Worst thing I see in Premier League football, players just surrounding referees. I don't think football have actually sorted out that yet. Referees are put under so much pressure, sometimes with 5 and 6 players around them. Hockey, I think we've grasped that nettle as long as we keep doing it. Okay, so don't permit crowding. More than one person is a crowd, and deal with it and take action. Okay, and then finally, on the last slide, just around behaviour, issuing cards. So Russell went through you know, how to report cards and what the cards are. Everybody in this call knows how the cards work and what cards there are. So this is really just about issuing a card, the mechanics of how to issue a card. And Linda asked me specifically to cover this. I've already mentioned it. Use all your tools first before you go to cards. You've got your whistle, you've got your voice, you've got your body language. Don't forget that those are all good management tools. So when you do resort to cards, first thing, keep it simple. When we issue a card, there should be no surprise. We should have prepped the players enough so that they know when they have got a card. And again, my match on Saturday, we had a break down the middle of the pitch. I blew the whistle quite loud, and as I was stopping time, the player just ran off the pitch. He didn't even wait for the card to come out of my pocket, which is quite nice from an umpire's perspective, because he knew there's no surprise. He knew exactly what was coming, because we'd set the game up to that point where the next breakdown was a card. Okay, so should be no surprises when we issue a card. When you're showing a card, stop the time, show the card to the player, hold it up nice and high so that everyone can see it. Your colleague needs to know what the card is. The other players need to know. Sometimes, and I think a couple of us have had this, if the sun's very bright, sometimes you hold up a green, it looks like a yellow from a distance. Okay, so you can actually turn the card halfway around in your hand a little bit so that people can see it. But hold it up high so everyone can see it. And for those games where we have a technical table, and in Ulster that's usually cup semi-finals and finals when we're doing technical tables, or interprovincials if we're doing them locally, make sure the technical table can see your card as well. A few things then on cards in Ulster hockey. Greens 2 minutes. If you give someone a green, and for example for descent, and they keep slabbering at you after you've given them the green, then you can upgrade it to yellow. Okay. A yellow card then is 5 or 10 minutes suspension. Keep it nice and simple. Don't be inventing your own timescales for yellows. Again, we've been doing this for many years. 5-minute yellow for technical offences, 10-minute yellow for physical offences. And you have the right to add 5 minutes on if someone, for example, shouts at you, gives you some abuse. You've given them a 5-minute yellow and they keep shouting at you. You do have the option to increase that to 10-minute yellow. Okay. If it's a 10-minute yellow, make sure you indicate that with your hands. So you just show your 10 fingers. We've got a video clip which you may recognize the umpire. Really good example of how that was done in a match for a 10-minute yellow. Okay. And in Ulster hockey, players go to their own team bench when they're suspended. Okay. Now, the penultimate bullet point is really, really important. You bring the player on at the next break in play after their suspension time is up. So let's talk about a 2-minute green card. You've given someone a 2-minute green, their 2 minutes is up, but the game is still in play. There's no break in play, and you as the umpire may actually be managing what's in front of you. The game could go on for another 30 or 40 seconds before there's a free or before the ball goes out of play. Do you know what? That player on the green card is going to be off for 2 minutes, 30 or 40 seconds. Right? So you just leave them there until there's an opportunity to bring them back onto the pitch. Okay? We're not bringing people on the fly after 2 minutes while there's no technical table. And I've had a few complaints from managers saying, my guy was off for nearly 3 minutes. Well, yeah, tough. That's the way it is. And if he hadn't got the card in the first place, he wouldn't have been off at all. So I don't really have a lot of sympathy for that. Same for 5 and 10 minutes. You bring the player on as soon as it's safe to do so after their suspension is up. And that could be 5.5 minutes or whatever. Okay. And lastly, and again, an important one, we don't have a lot of red cards. Thankfully, and nor should we be having lots of red cards. Red cards should be a rare event in a hockey match. But in the event you do give someone a red card, then they have to leave the pitch and the surrounds. They can't stay on the terracing and watch. They can't stand at the fence and watch the rest of the game. They have to go completely away from the match. Okay. So again, over the years, I've had a few examples. Someone got a red card, jumped over the fence, folded their arms and stood there. Okay, don't start the game until that person has gone. Okay, they can go to the clubhouse, they can leave the ground, whatever, but they cannot stay near the pitch. Yeah. Okay, there's no questions coming in, which is great. So we'll move on then. We'll do some aerials. Aerials is the old chestnut. how do we handle aerials? My goodness. Again, we'll cover this. I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. So there's a whole lot of words in that slide. The reason there's a lot of words in that slide is you can use this presentation later as an aid memoir. I'm not going to go through all of that slide in any detail. You can read it. You can read it afterwards if you want. But big thing about aerials, probably still to this day, the most contentious and the most difficult rule in hockey to manage, the one that causes generates the most discussion and probably causes us the most angst on the pitch. But basically what we're looking for in an aerial is everything being safe and under control. Okay. The rules of hockey now allow the ball to be off the ground. Players are very, very good when the ball's off the ground. So us as umpires, we have to be able to facilitate that. We have to be able to know how to manage it. So throwing aerials is a part of the game, going to stay part of the game for a long time, I believe. And we have to be able to manage those difficult decisions in those difficult areas. So if you move on to the next slide, this is a bit of a brain dump from me. I hope this helps. This is how I manage aerials. I know it's how some of my colleagues manage aerials. Hopefully, if you haven't seen this before, it will help you manage aerials. So, difficult rule. Aerials is an interpretive rule. A lot of it's about our interpretation as umpires, whether things are safe or not. So let's break it down and keep it really simple. So when an aerial's thrown, to me, there are 3 stages as an umpire that we have to watch for and where we make a decision. And you see that. So let's break it down. The first action is a player on the pitch gets ready to throw an aerial. Ask yourself, is it safe going up? So when that aerial is thrown, is it safe? Is it away from all the players? Has it gone up nice and high and not directly at anybody? And has no player had to take evasive action to get out of the way of that aerial? Okay. If it's safe going up, we play on. If it's not safe going up, so if someone tries to throw an aerial and it goes chest height towards another player from the opposition, or it goes waist height or chest height towards a crowd of players, the trick is to blow it really early and just give a free at that point. And then you've nothing else to manage after that. Okay, so blow it early, award a free from where the aerial was thrown because that's where the offence takes place. So first question, is it safe going up? If yes, we're playing on. Yeah. Now the ball's in the air and the ball's traveling over a distance. Current recommendation is that you watch the aerial in its last 20 meters of flight. Not always possible, but that gives you a good steer. So when the ball is in the air and traveling, what you should then do is ask yourself, is there a clear receiver? And we've been given this message out for many, many years. Look for a clear receiver. Is that ball, when it's in the air, clearly going to one player? Okay. So if it is, and it's going to one player, then that player is entitled to have the time and the space to collect that ball and bring it down safely onto the ground. Okay. So if it's going to one player and there's a clear receiver, then allow that player to receive the aerial. If the ball isn't clearly going to one player, keep it simple, throw early and award a free to the team that didn't throw the aerial. So the aerial's thrown, we've got some videos here which are quite good examples. The aerial's thrown, there's a crowd of players or it's not clear who that ball's going to, then blow it early and give a free to the team that didn't throw the aerial. Keep it simple, don't make it messy. Right? And the final question you ask yourself, when there is a clear receiver, the ball has gone to that player and that player collects it and brings it down safely onto the ground. The last question you ask yourself, did anyone interfere with that receiver before the ball was on the ground? If someone came in before the ball was on the ground, give a free to the receiver straight away. If no one interfered and they all stood back, then you play on. And that's the best result that we want. We want a nice aerial going up in the air, traveling safely, going to one clear receiver, they bring it down onto the ground, and we just put our arms out, play on. Okay. So if you want a method on the pitch, because when you're on the pitch, you can't consult your rule book, and you can't go through all the different scenarios of what might happen because the game is too quick. If you want a nice simple method and a few trigger points for managing an aerial, try that. Try that, those 3 points. Safe going up. Is there a clear receiver? Did anyone interfere with the receiver? And there's your 3 decision points for an aerial during a game. And the speed of some of the games that we umpire now, you have to have those little trigger points ready each time, because the game's too quick for you to sit and think and cogitate and wonder where the ball's gone next and who's done what and whatever. So try to just get that good discipline. Safe going up, clear receiver, did anybody interfere? I think if we get these right and we get those decision points right, the vast 95, 96% of our aerials will be really easy to manage. I think no matter how we do this as umpires, there's still going to be the odd messy one. We're still going to have the one that comes down, bounces off the receiver's stick, bounces away over to one side of the pitch. Some of the water-based pitches that we play on, all the ball bounces and bounces up higher than shoulder height. We're still going to have those messy ones. When that happens, rule them on danger, rule everything on safety and where the ball's going next. Okay. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully that's sort of aerials made easy. So we've got a couple of videos now. Before we run the videos, before we run anything, just a couple of bits of clarification. When we did the UHUA briefing, I know some of you were on it, and we do it every year. All the video clips were from international hockey, and very, very few people umpire international hockey. And what I talked to Linda about and Russell and George was that what we do, we umpire club hockey. So all the clips you're going to see, I think with only one exception, all the clips you're going to see are from local club matches. Okay, you'll recognize the venues, you'll recognize the players, you'll definitely recognize some of the umpires. So go easy on us. You'll see all the things we talked about happening in these clips and these games. Now, I deliberately picked and selected these videos not for discussion. This isn't really a discussion session because that's quite hard to do. These videos are picked for illustrative purposes, so they're to illustrate a point. Okay, so hopefully when you see the video run, you'll exactly get what was happening in the game and you'll totally agree with the decision. So this first one, hopefully I remember what all the videos are as we're going through them. This first one, the aerial's thrown, there's no clear receiver, so just watch what happens. Okay. Hopefully on your screens you can see that. I know it's sometimes difficult when you're doing it across a Zoom session like this. So the aerial was thrown. There's 2 players from opposite teams under the aerial. Somebody sticks their stick up in the air. It's really clear in that case there's no clear receiver. Okay, you see where the ball's coming down. Look how dangerous that is. Okay, and that's an easy one. You just blow the free early and you give the free to the team that didn't throw the aerial. Okay, next one then. Oh, we go on to the next video. Yeah, this one's a wee bit different. So again, it's an aerials girls game. The aerial's thrown. Again, no clear receiver there at all. You see that? And we've used this video before for some clips. So again, we can just run it. You see when the aerial's thrown, it's safe going up. It's nice, good aerial up in the air. But when it's coming down, no clear receiver. Okay.
Robert, we have a question in the chat.
Next video is quite a good one. I think this is you and me, Jamie. So if we can move on to the next video.
Maybe just while that one's loading, Robert, we have a question that has come into the chat. And if someone shouts "my ball," does that affect our decision making in an area?
Oh, sorry, Russell, I took my earbuds out.
Oh, you're all right, Robert. A question come into the chat there. If someone shouts "my ball," should that affect our decision making when we're judging an area?
Oh, absolutely not. Shouting "my ball" doesn't confer any rights on the receiver whatsoever. Okay, not like football. It's a football rule. So the clear receiver is the person the ball's going to, irrespective of who shouts. Yep. Okay, no, good question. Okay, this one is a slightly different clip. This is where there's an interception during the aerial. So again, if we run it, we can have a really good view of this. This is at Loch Moss, if you recognise the pitch. Okay, the reason I put that clip in, we've used it before for training purposes and stuff. The aerial's thrown, good clean aerial up in the air. The red defender just steps in and takes that as clean as you like. There's no reason for any umpire or any of us to interfere in this. When the ball's thrown, great interception, totally safe. He brings the ball down and everybody plays on. Okay, so be brave when it's coming down, when you see that happening, and allow these players to play, because some of these guys are really, really good, and girls as well, really, really good at taking the ball out of the air. Okay, so the other little lesson on an aerial, don't intervene if you don't have to. When it's nice and clear and it's safe and the game plays on, just let it play. Okay, that's a few clips on aerials from club hockey. One little thing we talked about at the start of the season, which is quite interesting, and I've actually noticed this in the games I've umpired this year, is aerials now, there's a tendency to throw shorter aerials. Years ago, people were throwing 30, 40, 50, 60-yard aerials up the pitch just to clear pressure. I think probably, and a few of us have talked about this in recent weeks, we're seeing some really good short aerials. So people throwing aerials 20 meters or 15 meters, diagonally across the pitch or sideways, and using it as a really good tactic. So just be aware that not all aerials travel 50, 60 meters. Some of them are short and sharp, but all the same principles apply. Safe going up. Is there a clear receiver? Did anybody interfere? Yep, a lob pass. Yep, that's it. It's happening more and more often. The players are getting really good at it. Okay, that's aerials. We'll move on then. The next piece that Linda asked me to cover was breaking down play. And I think this is really, really important. It's so important that we all manage this better during our games. And what do we mean by a breakdown? Well, you can see there, again, I'll not read them out because you can read them quicker than I can say them. But it's where one player or one team are trying to stop the other team playing. Okay. Very often it happens after a turnover, or it happens where a team have a quick breakaway and the team that's under pressure tries to stop them outside the rules. All right. We all know, we've all seen it happen. Could be knocking the ball away. It could be sticking your foot in front of the ball. All sorts of different things. It could be one of those tackles that's made to look accidental, but it's totally deliberate. Okay. So be aware of breaking down of play. I think as a group of umpires, it's something we need to manage better, and that we need to be aware of early in the game. If we can stamp it out in those first 5 or 10 minutes of the match and make sure the players understand that we're not having breakdowns, then the rest of the game will flow a lot better. Okay, so just be aware of players breaking it down deliberately. Okay? Fast breaks, turnovers are the key ones. Often a breakdown will happen, a deliberate breakdown will happen just outside the 23-meter area. Okay, now that could be, and you automatically think, well, that's the attacking team. The attacking team will break it down just outside the 23 so they don't concede a penalty corner. All right, so just be aware of that. We'll call that a red zone. So fouls just outside the 23-meter area are very often deliberate. And we'll talk about, you'll see on the video clips that we have, fouls inside the 23-meter area and how we deal with those. All right. So just be aware of where they happen on the pitch and the intent of the players, okay, in all those different cases. Okay, so if we go on, we'll run some videos. So again, these are for illustrative purposes, so hopefully you'll all agree. I think some of these are really, really good examples of breakdowns of play. So we'll fire this one. I really like this clip, mainly because this is what I used to do when I was playing. Bang. All right. Okay. Totally deliberate breakdown of play. The forward's got the wrong side of the defender. He's just taking him out on purpose. So penalty corner, yellow card. Yeah, I'll just play it again so everyone can see it. And the good thing about this is nobody argues. Nobody goes to the umpire and argues. They all just go, yeah, fair enough. Okay, really good illustration of a deliberate breakdown of play. And we remember our mantra: awareness, recognition, action. When you see that happening, don't forget to take action. Okay. Next video then. The next video was selected to prove that it's not always defenders who break down play. All right, so this is a breakdown by a forward for a team coming out of their own circle. Okay. Again, so we'll play it and then we'll talk about it. So this Cork Church of Ireland, they're now on the counter attack, and the forward just takes them out. Okay. So be very aware that sometimes a breakdown of play can happen at the defending end of the pitch. The forwards can break down the play just as much as defenders can. What teams will do is stop a fast counter attack. So stop it developing right at the very top end of the pitch, and then you get everybody back behind the ball and you're ready to defend again. Okay, so be aware. We'll play that one again because it happens quite quickly. So if you just watch what the red defender or the red forward does, he knows there's a counter attack on, and he literally just stops that guy coming out of the 23, and he gets his card. Okay, so be aware of the intent and what the players are trying to do on deliberate breakdowns. Okay, the next one's from a ladies' game. And this one's, again, slightly different scenario. So the red team will be bringing the ball out after the first few seconds. And this is one actually, and I put this in because this isn't a breakdown, and you'll see the player's reaction. The player wants a breakdown because she thinks she's been fouled. But in actual fact, she hasn't. So again, we'll play it and then we'll see. Ball goes into the circle for the black team. Okay, red player's running out with it. She loses control of the ball, runs into the black player, and then immediately looks at the umpire as if to say, oh, it's a breakdown. Okay, so again, as an umpire, be aware of that. She'd lost control of the ball. She wasn't getting the ball back. In that instance, there's no breakdown of play. Okay? But the player, because she lost possession, wants a breakdown. She wants a free in that case. Okay, the next one. Again, another good example of a potential fast counter attack. A player losing possession and then breaking it down. Okay, that's actually me umpiring, and the guy who did it tried to say that it was accidental. Okay, came to me and he just said that was an accident. Don't think so. And if it was, he probably needs to learn how to tackle a bit better. So again, breakdowns of play. We can see them when they're going towards a circle. We can see them going into the 23. Just be aware of where they can happen on the pitch, and especially to stop a fast break or after a turnover is where you typically get those deliberate breakdowns. Okay, and then the last little clip. This is an interesting one. If we move on to the next one, and you can decide for yourself whether this is deliberate or not. Quite hard to see in the camera, but again, another this one in midfield where the player's going through the back of another player receiving the ball. Okay. So breakdowns, something to be aware of, something I think we all need to be better at and recognise. Again, I've watched games over the last 4, 5, 6 years. One game in particular, which I watched in Belfast. I watched it as a spectator, not in any capacity whatsoever. And I saw one team constantly break down another team. It was a team near the bottom of the table just stopped the team at the top of the table playing. Attack after attack, all the way over the pitch, they broke it down. and there wasn't one card issued or one warning given in the entire game. And obviously the good team was getting more and more frustrated about what was happening. There was cards issued in the game, not for breaking down a play. And yet there were probably a good dozen or 15 examples of where the umpires in that game could have stopped it. Okay, so recognizing breaking down, allowing teams, we talked at the start about flow and about promoting skill and striving for excellence and having a good game. Managing breakdowns is really, really important and part of that. Recognizing it and taking action to stop it. Okay, and then moving on from that, I'm conscious of the time, so we'll just move on quickly. The last piece that Linda asked me to cover, hopefully these are a wee bit more clear cut. Sliding tackles and body checks. So just by their very nature, they are what they say on the tin. These are the bad fouls, okay? These are the things we want to cut out of hockey because they're dangerous and people get injured and there's no place for them in our game, okay? So I think we all know the current guidance. A sliding tackle that brings a player to the ground is a minimum 10-minute yellow, okay? No question, no argument, let's all do that. So if someone slides into someone else and makes them fall down, 10-minute yellow card, okay? Slightly different, sliding tackle that doesn't necessarily make contact with the player, but actually makes contact with the ball. So you see players sliding in front of the ball to stop the ball traveling to another player. That's a deliberate breakdown, okay? So where somebody lies on the ground to put their body in the way of the ball, yellow card, because it's a technical offense, because it's not dangerous to anyone else except the fool who's done it. Then we're thinking probably 5-minute yellow, right? Or a minimum of a 5-minute yellow. And then any physical fouls, for example, a body check or anything else that floors a player, then 10-minute yellow. Or again, sorry, minimum 10-minute yellow. So where someone puts in a really bad tackle, but they haven't actually gone to ground or they haven't slid in, you can still give them a 10-minute yellow card. Okay, don't wait for the sliding tackle to do 10-minute yellow. So those high risk physical offences deserve a high penalty and a high tariff penalty. Again, let's not shy away from them. Don't substitute a green card for a yellow card. If someone puts in a really bad tackle and it's reckless and it's dangerous, that's not a green card. Okay, that's at least a yellow card and probably a 10-minute yellow card. Don't sort of compromise and give a green or give someone a warning when it's very clearly a 10-minute yellow card. Okay, let's step up and do what we're supposed to do and make sure we deal with those very, very dangerous fouls in the game. Okay, and a few slides, or a few videos, sorry, just to illustrate the points. Hopefully, again, these are self-explanatory, shouldn't be too much in them. First one, I think, is a club game in England, I believe. Bang. Okay. Just watch it, slow motion. Guy has no intention whatsoever of playing the ball there. All right. Really dangerous, really reckless, high risk, high tariff. That one, the clip doesn't run long enough, I think, to see what the umpire gives. It's at very least a 10-minute yellow. Wouldn't be surprised if that was a red card. Okay, so those are the big ones. Those are the ones to watch with or to watch out for. Next clip, then you'll recognize the umpire in this one. This is a really good example. Again, it spoils the surprise. It's a sliding tackle. This guy goes to ground, fouls another player and brings him down. This is a 10-minute yellow. Russell's the umpire in the red if you haven't recognized him. But watch the clip right to the end and watch how Russell shows everyone that it's a 10-minute yellow, because it's a really good example of how to do it. And go ahead and play, yeah. Okay, so Alex Burns slides in, absolutely cleans him. No question, yellow card. Okay. In this particular game, it was an EYHL game. There's a technical table just behind where the camera is. Okay. So you see Russell waits, waiting for the player to leave the pitch, and then shows, you see that shows the big 10 minutes. So now everybody in the whole ground knows that that's a 10-minute yellow. That's really good management. And what you've told everyone, we talk about the arena principle. We've told everyone at Gary Duff that day that anybody who does that's getting a 10-minute yellow. Okay, so let's all do that where it deserves it. Oh, Jamie's put up a message. Love the coach's reaction to this one. What there's a bit of, I don't know if you can hear the sound of these videos. Someone shouts yellow, and the coach here, who's Neil Welsh, I think, turns around and goes, "Shut up, you," which is quite good. But it is a 10-minute yellow, whether he likes it or not. Okay, that's a really good example of where you have that 10-minute yellow card. Just put your 2 hands up and make sure everybody knows. Okay, it's a deterrent as well for the rest of the game. Next one then is a floodlit game. Now, just before we play it, it's quite hard to see. The guy who commits the offence, if you look up near the halfway line, it's not the players in the immediate foreground who commit the offence. It's the next row of players around the halfway line. And if you watch, the ball is going to go to the left on the screen. Watch what the player in white does. Okay, and this was about 2 minutes from the end of the match. This happened. So just play it now. Watch the white player going towards the left of the screen. There he goes now. Okay, absolutely empties the blue player. Okay. Again, yellow card, 10 minutes. The guy who did it actually came on and apologised after the final whistle. He came back, he apologised to the player he'd done it to, and he apologised to me for some reason. But again, that's the sort of sliding tackle, far too dangerous. We have to stamp those out straight away. Okay. And the very last video, again, conscious of the time, we'll move on to the last one. I'm not going to comment in this one. You can decide for yourself what about this. Is, of course, this is about sliding tackles and body checks. So I'll let you decide for yourself in this girls' game what the foul is, and then some other time we can have a debate about it. Okay, if we just play that again, George, and let everyone see it again. So the question here, and this one has divided opinion, is it a foul or not? And if it is, what's the sanction? There we go. I have nothing more to cover. I've covered aerials, breaking down of play, and tackles and sliding tackles. Hopefully the videos were interesting. Again, because they're from club matches, I think they're a bit more real, or they're the sort of things that we're going to be seeing on Saturdays and midweek games during the season. So hopefully all that was useful. Hopefully you learned a little bit. And I'm not on the committee, but I'm quite happy if anybody has questions offline, drop me an email or give me a ring. I'm quite happy to talk at any time about hockey. So thank you for listening, and hopefully that was interesting.
That's very helpful, Robert. Thank you for taking us through that. One last question that we just didn't cover. If anybody has any final questions before we finish, please feel free to put them in the chat. But one has come in that on aerials, if there is an obvious receiver and the opposition are only, for example, 3 meters away, they let the receiver receive the ball, should they be penalized for being only 3 meters away, even if they do not interfere with the receiver? If the receiver then makes a hames of the receipt and commits a foul, should we blow against the receiver?
Okay, that's a really good question, and that has obviously happened to lots of us over the years. So good question. The player within 3 meters isn't interfering in any way with the receiver. So let's talk about the position of that player who's within 3 meters. I think if they're right in front of the receiver, or they're in the receiver's eye line, then I think there's a strong argument to say that they're interfering with the receiver taking the ball. Because the receiver watching the ball coming down with the player 3 meters right in front of them is obviously going to see that solid body right in front of them. So I think in that case, even though they don't interfere, I think we're probably giving a free to the receiver, because the receiver could very well argue that being in my line of sight and being actually there in front of me has resulted in me not receiving that ball. Okay. The one that then again is slightly different is where the player is within 3 meters, but they're directly behind the receiver. Okay, the receiver's looking at the ball comes down, and there's a player within 3 meters directly behind them who doesn't interfere, doesn't make any sound, doesn't do anything whatsoever to put that receiver off, and the receiver just misses the ball or it bounces off their stick. Certainly my view is that in that case we play on, because that person within 3 meters has had no impact whatsoever on the ball being received. So I think what we're looking at for a player within 3 meters is their position relative to the receiver. Okay. If they're in front of the receiver or in the receiver's line of vision, then I think we're quite right to give the receiver the benefit of the doubt and give them the free because they've been interfered with. I think if they're behind the receiver, then we don't blow it. And we play on, and if the receiver misses the ball, that's their problem. The other little distinction I'll add in that if someone's within 3 meters and they shout boo, or they say something, or they wave their arms, that's interference. Okay, so it's only where that person who's close by remains absolutely passive. But any sort of comment, any sort of verbal, or any sort of movement to try to distract the receiver, we give the receiver the free straight away. And I know that's contentious, and I know it's caused us issues in matches, but I think that's the way to blow it, where the person who's within those 3 meters is directly behind the receiver and not interfering in any way, play on. And we're not going to give the receiver a free because they missed the ball. Okay, we don't give frees for bad skill or bad technique. Okay, it's why aerials are so difficult, because they're interpretative. The rules aren't laws; they're rules, and we have to make a decision. And that is one of the most difficult decisions. My view is where they remain passive, then you play on, provided they haven't interfered with the receiver. Okay, was there a couple of other questions that I noticed coming in?
No, a couple of comments. Glad to see people have found the videos useful, and if we have another opportunity to do that later in the season, we'll certainly try to, because I think we're all agreed as to how useful it is. So if there are no final questions, thank Robert again for giving up your time to take us through that. It's much appreciated, and thanks George for organising this evening, and thank you all for calling in. So please do keep in touch through the season, and hopefully I'll see you all at some point along the way. But I think that's all for now, and talk to you again soon.
Okay, thanks, Russell. Good session. Thank you.